Hello and welcome to sunny Brighton. This is where I live. Did you know that Brighton is a famous seaside resort in the UK? But just a few centuries ago, it was a small village with only 4 streets. Today, I'm going to take you on a little history tour of Brighton's housing. So let's get started.
I've always wondered, how does a building like this end up next to a building like this?
Have you heard of Georgian housing? And do you know what Georgian means? Georgian basically means that a house was built during the reign of one of the 4 King Georges. So King George I, King George II, the 3rd and the 4th. And this started from 1714, this time period. Some features of Georgian houses are that they're built to be very wide so that they look impressive from afar. And they also have windows that are evenly spaced like this in a regular grid formation. That's to reduce window tax, because at that time there was a tax based on the number of windows that a house had.
At that time, the wealthy usually lived in towns in terraced houses. The houses were usually made of stone or brick, and they were symmetrical, both internally and externally. They usually had 2 to 3 stories, and the door mostly opened straight onto the road with no porch.
Have you seen this building before? This is the most iconic building of Brighton, and it's called the Royal Pavilion. Now, it first started being built in 1787 by King George IV, who was then just the Prince of Wales and not the Prince Regent yet. I'll explain what Prince Regent means in a second. So George was responsible for making Brighton a popular seaside resort that was fashionable and high class. Now, the reason it looks like an Indian palace on the outside is because George was really interested in other cultures. He'd never been abroad himself, but he was fascinated, and inside the building is kind of Chinese inspiration. So it's a really interesting building and worth taking a look inside if you're here. But it's arguably this building, which is one of the oldest buildings in Brighton, that's more important than the Royal Pavilion. That's because King George used to stay here with his friends when he first visited Brighton. And during his stays here, he fell in love with the place. And that's what gave him the idea to build the Royal Pavilion. Welcome to Regency Square. Back in the day, this would have been a really fancy place to live, and it shows classic Regency architecture. So what does Regency mean? Regency means built during the time that George was acting as the Prince Regent. In this case, it was because his dad, King George III, was incapacitated by a mental illness. So George didn't become the true King George IV until 1820, when his father passed away.
So what is Regency architecture, and how does it differ from the Georgian housing that came before it? Well, Regency-style houses used different materials. Because of the wars at the time, there was a shortage of timber and high taxes on other building materials. After Britain won the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, the war for goods came to an end. This meant that there was a financial boom and increased British self-confidence. Regency architecture was developed around this time. It shows simple symmetrical proportions and elements of Greek and Roman architecture. These days, of course, there are very ordinary things in these buildings, offices, flats and shops mostly, like this Tesco. This means people often overlook the intricacy of these buildings. We hardly even see them.
Regency style features more decorative ornamentation, such as balconies, railings, ornate columns, and that kind of stuff when compared with the previous Georgian style. At that time, terraced houses were always very tall and narrow for all social classes. Brighton was overflowing with architecture inventiveness, and in 1832 a famous politician said that Brighton surpassed in beauty all other towns in the world.
We can see Regency-style houses all along the beachfront in Brighton, such as here. This is where the famous YouTuber PewDiePie used to live.
As the city grew, detached houses became more popular on the outskirts of Brighton. There would be a separate entrance for servants to walk in at the back. This area, though, is now considered inner city Brighton, so most of these houses, in fact probably all of them, have been converted into flats to rent out.
In the late Georgian period and early Victorian period, semi-detached houses started to be built. They were a compromise between the terraced houses of the town centre and the detached villas of the suburbs where land was cheaper. To this day, semi-detached houses are one of the most popular kinds in the UK.
In 1830, George IV died, and the Victorian period began in 1837. In the early Victorian period, there was what's known as the Battle of the Styles. Some people preferred Gothic and some people preferred classical architecture.
This house is more classically inspired, with irregularly spaced windows, some bay windows, and a columned entrance porch.
While these buildings show classic Victorian taste.
Especially towards the later years of the Victorian period, architects started experimenting with a range of styles, from Queen Anne style with its brick and chimney stacks and bay windows, neoclassical style, Gothic revival with arches to the first floor and decorative balconies, and Tudor-Bethan style, which combined styles from Tudor and Elizabethan times. The French actually burnt down Brighton during Tudor times, so there aren't many original Tudor houses in Brighton. The ones you see are mostly just designed to look like Tudor houses. This pub, for example, was recreated in the 1930s.
This street is a good example of the transition from Regency style to Victorian Italianate style.
Eventually, the mishmash style of Victorian times, when architects could pick and choose from different styles, morphed into the huge array of houses that we see today. Before and after the Second World War, modernism began to reshape Britain, favouring rectangular forms and strong horizontal and vertical lines. People thought it looked good because it represented a new future, clean, rational, and free from old hierarchies. Older buildings were designed around class, who entered where, who lived on which floor. Modernism tried to strip those signals away and treat everyone as equal users of the space. Today, it's pretty much whatever you fancy. There are modern houses, bungalows, houses I like, houses I don't like, houses on boats, and even beach huts.
This beach hut, which is not really a house, sold for £65,000. For more insights into the UK, its language and history, check out our Learn English Through UK Culture online programme. And why not subscribe to the channel? See you next time.